Welcome everyone to Train Tuesday and Happy New Year. We are now officially in 2024. I hope you all had a wonderful holiday, Christmas, Kwanzaa, whatever celebrations you attended to. I hope you had a good one. And of course, for most of us, New Year's. So 2024 for us. And we've got some great stuff to talk about, not only tonight, but throughout the year. We've got some surprises for you. Until then, let's go ahead and start 2024 with some shout outs. I see Todd, Jeffrey, EMP Railroad 93, Mr. Dave Reynolds is here, Sid is here, DJ Model Works is in the house, Elko Man Kyle, Stephen, George, Brody, Daniel, Anthony, Jason, and JD Boyd, just to name a few. We've got a lot for you here tonight. We're going to be unpacking quite a bit and a lot of ground to cover tonight. We're going to be talking about Athearn Genesis GP18s as well as GP7Rs. And we've also got some tank cars in the Athearn Genesis line that we're going to be talking about. So stay tuned for that. Also stay tuned for any questions you may have for after the show. Now, I say it occasionally and sometimes it gets forgotten or missed. When I am doing the presentation, I do not always see your questions. So please do not get offended if I don't see your question and call out. We do get a lot of comments here, and pretty much Train Tuesday is a one-man show, and you're looking at the guy that's running it. So I don't always catch all those comments, although I strive to catch as many as possible. Now, again, we're going to be talking Athearn Genesis tonight. This is HO scale. N scale, guys, don't worry. Your turn is coming up. Let's do another round of shout outs and get started. I see Harold and George and NS1903, Charles Woods, KCG Rail Gilbert, Derek, Abel, Donnie is here, and Abel G, N scale for the win. I hear you, buddy. Don't worry, we've got some N scale, but not tonight. We're going to talk about that later on. So here we are, and we're going to be talking about Athearn Genesis. We're going to talk about the GP18s as well as some rebuilt GP7s. But first, a little background on these EMD locomotives. So it was back in 1949, EMD introduced the GP7, and the basic design followed most diesel switchers with the addition of a short hood instead of just an end cab. Now, the hoods were also a full height to better accommodate the diesel engine and mechanical and electrical components. Now, years later, many railroads chose to rebuild both their GP7s and their GP9s for continued service. That's basically because it was cheaper to do this than purchase a brand new locomotive. Now, some railroads adopted a GP7R designation to indicate a rebuilt unit. Now, after the 7s and the 9s, EMD introduced the GP18. It began production in late 1959 and was based on EMD's successful GP9, although the latter model was still in production at that same time. Now, the GP18 is considered the last of the builder's first generation models. It's similar in appearance to the GP7 and GP9. However, the GP18 was slightly more powerful. It came with the option of either a low or a high short cab. Something that had only been done as a special request with the first two locomotives. Now, before I go further, I know that there's the legions of folks out there that want low-nose GP18s. When I tell you we're working on it, we are working on it, but we did want to do another release of these because these roads that we're offering this month were requested through our Athearn product suggestion. Also, keep in mind that we only have so many developers on staff, and as much as we wish we could just snap a finger and make these models for you, it's not quite that simple. But please keep the faith, we are working on it. So back to the GP18, it was the final version of General Motors' first locomotive prime mover, the 16-cylinder model 567D1, which could produce 1,800 horsepower, the most powerful in the series up to that point. At just over 56 feet in length, the GP18 was the same length as its predecessor models and was very visually similar, except for the new radiator grills, which were also used in the GP20. Now, interesting note, while thousands of GP7s and GP9s were produced, just a few hundred GP18s were ultimately built for a little more than just 2 dozen railroads. Now, today, as we'll see in some of our offerings, several GP18s remain in operation on numerous short lines and industrial operations all around the country. So we're going to see a little bit of everything tonight as far as GP18s and GP7Rs, because these locomotives may have started with a Class 1, but in some cases they're on their second or third short line. Now what you see on your screen here, this is a GP18 from the previous run. This is Conrail 7499, and this is one of our Prime for Grime versions. You can probably guess the original owner of this locomotive, but this is early days Conrail. And if you're a Conrail fan, you're going to want to stick around because we've got some new Conrail in the GP18s to show off tonight. Now, this is available. It is in stock. If you are looking for an early Conrail GP18 to add to your roster, the item number on this is ATHG 30724. Again, that's ATHG 30724. So without further ado, let's talk about what we're going to be offering this month for pre-order. You have until Friday, January 26th to place your pre-orders, and let's dive in. We're going to start with the Chicago and Northwestern. Now, they ordered 6 GP18s from EMD in 1960. These units featured 4 36-inch radiator fans instead of the more common 2 48-inch fans that were common practice for late EMD orders. This was also unique to the Chicago Northwestern. Now, we're offering 3 schemes to choose from, including the bicentennial scheme shown here. So some variations here. Let's start with 1775. That's the one on the top. This is a 1960s era paint scheme, but it's a standard simplified scheme. You'll notice it doesn't have the end stripes. Now for you guys in the 1970s, and this was one that was highly requested, and we wanted to do this one for a while, but it was going to require some new tooling. We'll talk about that in a moment. This is the 1970s era bicentennial scheme, and yes, those beacons are included, and if you spring for the Tsunami 2 version, those beacons are functional in DCC. Finally, we've got 1777. This is again a 1960s era. This is the earlier scheme that does have the end stripes, and it also has dual side road numbers as seen here. Now, some of the features that are specific for the Chicago Northwestern GP18s include the late walkway with inspection holes, frame side mounted air tanks, large 2,350 gallon fuel tank, dual blat horns, winterization hatch, non-dynamic brakes, and these will have the early pilots with footboards. So Chicago Northwestern fans of the 60s and 70s, you're going to definitely want to add these to your roster. Now we've got some smaller ones that probably surprised a lot of you when we announced these last Friday. We're going to start with the Central California Traction. Now, Central California Traction started as an interurban streetcar line back in 1906. Freight operations run between Stockton and Lodi, California. In the early 1980s, CCT purchased 2 former Rock Island GP18s to help replace their aging Elko fleet. Now, these were painted in an attractive bright red and white scheme, as you see here, and they were used all over their system. However, by the 2010s, they were sold into private ownership, and they were subsequently replaced by SW1500s and 3 Brookville rebuilt hybrid locomotives. So we're offering 2 from 1981 on up era. So if you're an 80s fan, you're going to want to probably pick these guys up. You've got 1790 and 1795. Now they have some specific features, including all new tooling, which will include the new non-dynamic with roof access hatches. And these are also going to include front and rear gyro lights, which will work if you get the Tsunami 2 versions. These are former Rock Island units. They're going to include 1,700 gallon fuel tanks, partial skirting above fuel tank, wheel bearings per prototype, and Nathan P5 horn. Coming up next is Midsouth Rail Corporation. Now, the Midsouth Rail Corporation is based out of Jackson, Mississippi, and they started back in 1986 when they purchased 373 miles of trackage from the Illinois Central Gulf Railroad. They acquired 4 ex-IC GP18s, only one of which was a high-nose version. Now, this unit was built as IC 9404 in 1960. The unit was retired and stored by the mid 2000s. So again, if you're doing 1989 into the 90s, this would be a good locomotive to pick up. Now, this will also have the new non-dynamic with roof access hatches, which again, that's brand new tooling. We've never offered it before on either the 7s or the 18s. 1,700-gallon fuel tank, short hood mounted bell, and this is going to have the Nathan P3 horn, but all of the horn bells are facing forward, so it's kind of a neat spotting feature. Now, Conrail fans, we see you. The Conrail fan requests grow sometimes on a daily basis. When the Lehigh Valley was absorbed into Conrail in 1976, most of the motive power was eventually repainted into the then new corporate colors. A few kept their high hood short hoods past the merger and were used for pulling freights on former Lehigh Valley trackage as well as other parts of the Conrail system. And we've got two road numbers here that we're offering, 7496 and 7499. If you are doing early 1980s era Conrail, even late 1970s, you can justify adding these to your roster. Now, features that are specific just for the Conrail GP18s. These are both former Lehigh Valley units. They will have winterization hatches and dynamic brakes. They'll both have the Nathan K3 horn, and these are going to have the smaller 1,300-gallon fuel tank. Again, these have been extremely popular. Conrail guys have been wanting some earlier Conrail, so we wanted to go ahead and offer these two road numbers for you. Coming up next is two roads that probably a lot of you thought you'd never see. Now, one of the things that I'm going to disclose here is a lot of folks, specifically within Canada or the Northeast and even some of the Southeast, will always accuse Athearn as being a West Coast company that only thinks about West Coast roads. Well, you can't get any more Northeast than their first subject here, and that's New England Southern. Now, New England Southern Railroad, or the Nessie system as fans call her, was established in 1981 to take over freight operations on former Boston and Maine Railroad lines in central New Hampshire. In 1985, and facing traffic and territory increases between Concord and Manchester, the railroad purchased former Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific EMD GP18 1341, renumbered 503 and painted in the attractive green and yellow scheme that you see here. The unit served the Little Yankee short line faithfully until its sale in 2007 to another short line in New Hampshire called the New Hampshire North Coast Railroad, where it still operates today, a testament to EMD's durability. Now, I want to thank Rick K. Fury for writing the foreword on this locomotive. And full disclosure, this is where your author here got his teeth cut rail fanning. I started rail fanning 503 as well as its sister unit in Concord, which is technically my hometown, in the late 80s. So kind of neat to see something that I was rail fanning when I was still in high school being offered as a Genesis model. Again, this is a former Rock Island unit, and this is how it appeared in 1986 all the way up to 2000s. Now, one of the features that are going to be included with this model is, again, since it's a former Rock Island locomotive, it's going to have the new non-dynamic roof access hatches, 1,700-gallon fuel tank, dual strobe effect, and again, that will work if you have the Tsunami 2, non-dynamic brake, front and rear plows, Nathan P5, and one thing I do want to stress, and a lot of you guys that are probably fans of the Nessie, we actually did work with Rick as well as the former owner of the short line, Pete Dearness, and we had a plethora of everything from artwork to images. So I think we're going to have this one spot on for you Nessie fans. Now let's go a little bit down south to the border, and here we have the SBC 2306. Now, the SBC operated between Mexicali, Baja California, and Benjamin Hill, Sonora, and Mexico. Through a few different mergers, they became part of NDM Railroad in 1987. But if you're modeling the 1980s, you can justify adding this model to your fleet. Striking really nice bright orange red paint scheme. Again, we're seeing lots more requests for railroads south of the U.S. border, and frankly, we love it. We love the variety, and this one is tested pretty popular as well. We got a lot of requests for um, this railroad as well as others south of the American border through our Athearn product suggestion email. Now, this is going to have the Leslie 3-chime horn, dynamic brakes, and it will have a 1,700-gallon fuel tank. Switching gears from short lines and going back to Class 1, let's go back to the 1960s and let's talk about the Norfolk and Western. Now, beginning in late 1959, Norfolk Western purchased over 45 GP18s from EMD and inherited an additional 10 from the Nickel Plate Railroad. The Norfolk Western units purchased new were set up to run long hood forward and featured dynamic braking, while the nickel plate units were set up with the short hood as the front and featured a front gyro light and non-dynamic brakes. Now, after the merger with Norfolk Southern years later, some of these were rebuilt into slugs or sold off to be used for short lines. So we've got a couple of different units here, and they've got various pedigrees to them. So first we've got number 945 that you see on the top of your screen. This is a 1960s era dynamic brakes, long hood forward operation, 5-chime Leslie horn, exhaust spark arresters, hood mounted bell, Norfolk and Western modified left side skirting with access doors. So this is a Norfolk Western ordered locomotive. Likewise, 949 shares a lot of the same features. It too is a 1960s era with dynamic brakes, long hood forward operation, 5-chime Leslie horn, exhaust spark arresters, hood mounted bell, and that Norfolk Western modified left side skirting with access doors. Now the third one is a little bit different. This is 2704, and while it's 1960s era, this is a former nickel plate, so that means that it's operating in a short hood forward operation. It also has the front gyro light, which if you get the Tsunami 2, that gyro light does function. Short hood mounted bell, exhaust deflectors, and right side winterized window. So similar paint schemes and everything else, but because of where they came from, they're going to have slightly different features, and that is something that the Genesis line is known for. Now, further features of the Norfolk and Western GP18s, these are in the Pelver blue scheme with what a lot of rail fans call the hamburger logo. If you look at it carefully, and if you're familiar with that logo, you may have heard the same thing, but a lot of folks, I've heard the older guys in the Midwest call it the hamburger logo. These are going to be set up with dynamic or non-dynamic, that's per the road number. They're all going to feature 1,700-gallon fuel tanks and pilots with footboards. Remember, we still had those in the 60s. And here's one I know, one fan that's on by the name of David. I know he's going to be excited about these. Mr. Reynolds is a Southern Railway fan, and I'm sure he's excited about these. The Southern Railway inherited a batch of EMD GP18s from Central of Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia, and the original Norfolk Southern. Now, they were painted in Southern's beautiful tuxedo scheme and could be found in yards and on locals. A few were even painted with Central of Georgia lettering, and we're offering 3 slightly different versions to choose from. That's one of the great things about the Southern Railroad is, in my opinion, they had one of the most striking paint schemes. But there's a lot of variety to this railroad, and it's a really interesting railroad. We're going to start with our top unit, which is 171X. This is a late 1970s era, and this is a former Central of Georgia unit. It's got a Nathan P5 horn, pilot-mounted footboards, hood-mounted bell, and Southern paint, but if you look carefully, it's got CFG sub lettering, so that's kind of neat. 175 is next, and this is again 1970s era. former Central of Georgia 175, and this has a Nathan P5 horn, pilot-mounted footboards, hood-mounted bell, Southern paint, but if you look carefully on the long hood, Central of Georgia is lettered on its long hood. Pretty cool. And then finally, we've got Southern 179H, again, late 1970s era. This is a former Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia locomotive. It also has a Nathan P3 horns, and all of the, if you look at the horn, you'll see that they call those bells are facing forward, both for the front and rear horns. The pilot has removed footboards, short hood mounted bell, and this one is painted in the Southern tuxedo paint scheme, but carefully, if you look, you can see the T, A, and G sub lettering. Pretty cool. They all at first glance look identical, but when you start looking at them closely, you start to see the different details. And again, this is where Genesis shines. Now, features that are common across all three of these models, they're all former CG and T, A, and G locomotives. They're non-dynamic. They're short hood forward operation. The horn and bell is placement per road number. And these have a really small 1,300-gallon fuel tank. Now we're going to finish tonight in our locomotives, and we're not going to talk about 18s. We're going to talk about GP7s, specifically GP7Rs that were rebuilt by the Rock Island. Now, during the late 1970s, Rock Island rebuilt a large batch of their locomotives to help extend their lives. The main spotting features of these so-called GP7Rs with a new addition of roof-mounted engine access doors and a new coat of blue and white paint. Many of these ended up finding homes on other railroads after the Rock Island went bankrupt in 1980. Now, interestingly enough, GP7R 4506 was recently restored back into its original Rock Island colors, and it operates in a rather large railroad museum in northern Illinois. Now, a lot of rail fans at the time were calling this paint scheme bankruptcy blue. And years later, even though most Rock Island fans really preferred the earlier paint schemes, including the maroon and the later fire engine red and yellow, there was a following for the blue and white. And that following continues today. And of course, now we actually do have another railroad, a short line called the Rock Island Rail, that adopted the same colors. So pretty cool how bankruptcy blue went from out of favor to in favor with a lot of railroad modelers as well as one prototype. So let's talk about the three different locomotives that we're offering here. 4506 features late small louver battery box doors, standard EMD fuel tank, and what we're going to do is we're going to include an optional whip antenna for the current version as it appears in the museum. Now this part will be added, but it will not be on the model itself. We'll include it in a small poly bag, so if you want to add that detail and operate the locomotive as it is now, you can certainly do that. 4523 is also going to have the late small louver battery box doors, rebuilt Rock Island style fuel tank, and then finally 4540 has early large louver battery box doors, a rebuilt Rock Island style fuel tank. Now the features, again, that new tooling that I've been talking about on a few of these locomotives tonight. This is going to have the non-dynamic with roof access hatches. These will also have the early pile style headlights, firecracker antennas, early pipe style handrails, and Nathan P5 horn. Now this one, I will say, we did a survey a while ago, probably about a year or so ago. And this was by far the #1 road of choice to do the GP7s in, was the Rock Island rebuilds in the blue and white. So Rock Island fans, your ship, or should I say your Jeep, has come in. Now features that go across the line with Athearn Genesis GP7s and the GP18s. This is pretty much a broad spectrum. You can go to our website at athearn.com, select the new announcements tab, and then select the PDF for the 18s and the 7Rs and see all of the details. and features of these models. But just off the top, these include coupler cut levers, flexible train line and MU hoses, drop steps unless noted, MU stands, lift rings, wire grab irons, the list goes on. We are offering them as just DC only, non-sound, although they are DCC ready with a 21-pin NEM connector. And we're also offering them with the Tsunami 2 decoders, which include sound. Now, if you go with the DC version, they are $219.99, and if you go with the Tsunami 2, they're $319.99. I say this every time, but apparently some guys still seem to miss it. This is MSRP, so contact your dealer about your price. Yes, we realize this is probably a little bit more than the GP7 that you paid for back in 1959, but these have been severely upgraded compared to what those units were, barring rubber band drives. These have a much better drive system, a lot more detailed, correct proportions, I'll say. The old blue box GP7/9s did not have the correct proportions. And of course, we have to remember inflation. A lot has changed since 1959, and we can see that everywhere from the gas pumps to the grocery stores to real estate. Models are no different. So there you have it. There are the GP7 rebuilds and the GP18s. Now let's switch gears and let's talk about tank cars real quick, because we're going to be offering the Athearn Genesis HO scale GATC 20K tank cars. And the tank car that you see on your screen right now is a GATX car number 29307. Now, we don't have stock of this anymore. This was from a few runs back. However, you may still find these at your favorite online retailer or your favorite hobby shop. If you are interested, the part number for this particular car is ATHG 40165. Again, that's item number ATHG 40165. Now let's talk about the ones that we're offering for pre-order that you'll have until January 26th to pre-order with your dealer. Now, all the cars that I'm going to show you tonight are available in 3 additional road numbers. So altogether, 3 different road numbers per road. They're available as singles only. We're going to start in 1974 with this GATX white car that you see at the top of your screen. This is car number 44013. We're also going to offer car numbers 44027 as well as 44030. For you guys that are modeling the 1990s, here's the Regent Chemical and Research car. This is car number 1144. Their reporting marks are RCRX. And on top of 1144, we're also going to offer 1150 and 1177. Going back to the early 1970s, in fact, 1972 to be exact, we've got the Relco tank line. This is car number 2207. Their reporting marks are RELX, and we're also going to offer car numbers 2222 and 2235. Finally, in the same era, 1972, actually, next page over, we've got something from 1972. We're going to talk about PPG Industries. This is car number 10843. Their reporting marks are PPGX. On top of this car, we're also going to offer car numbers 10854 and 10877. And then finally, sticking with the 1970s scheme, we have got GATX de Mexico. This is a 1970s era car, so if you're modeling the 70s, this is a perfect fit for you. Their reporting marks are still GATX. This is car number 43927. We're also going to offer 2 additional cars, 43941 and 43955. Now you can see these cars and pre-order through your dealer, and you can see these at athearn.com under the new announcements tab. Now let's go back to the picture I had earlier of the actual model so you can talk about the details that you can see, because a picture like this definitely helps you learn what details are included with these models. Now, all these models that we're talking about tonight, since they are Genesis, they are prototypical paint schemes. They are actually based on actual freight cars. They are going to have a separately applied brake wheel and end ladders. They're weighted for trouble-free operation, painted and printed for realistic decoration. Again, these are based on actual freight cars. All of them will have body-mounted McHenry operating scale knuckle couplers. When these come in stock, which will be projected ETA, and of course that can change, but we're talking May of 2025, there will be replacement parts available for these cars. Genesis cars are very detailed, but they can be somewhat delicate. So we do try to get replacement parts for all of our models, not only for a warranty situation, but I'm sure I'm not the only one that maybe have grabbed a Genesis car in the wrong way or maybe let it fall. If that happens, there are replacement parts available. You can contact us for that. These will have 70 or 100-ton roller bearing trucks with animated spinning bearing caps per prototype. Machine metal wheels with RP25 contours operate on all brands of HS scale track. And these have a new window packaging for easy viewing, plus interior blister safely holds the model for convenient storage. If you've seen the new Genesis packaging, there's actually a little lift lid, really cool. That cardboard is a little bit thicker than what we used in the past, and of course the clamshell packaging really helps minimize the damage when you're taking these to and from an operating session. Minimum radius on these is 18 inches, and MSRP on these cars is $54.99. Again, that is MSRP, so please contact your dealer so you can find out what your price is. And you're going to want to pre-order those. January 26, 24 is the last day that you can pre-order. So do yourself a favor, get those pre-orders in early, and you won't be disappointed next year when these come in. So there you have it. We've got some GP18s, we've got some in Class 1, we've got some short line service. We've got a GP7R that was highly, highly, highly requested thanks to our survey and a product suggestion email. And we've got some great tank cars for your layout. At this time, we got time for a few questions. And then I'm going to let you guys get back to some modeling. So let's see what we've got. I'm going to go back to see if anybody was asking anything while I was talking. A lot of folks saying that you can never have too many tank cars. Yeah, that's true. Someone else was asking, can these be used for, I believe it was corn syrup. Most of the ones that we've got in this run are chemical based. I would have to look again to see, but I think they're all going to be chemical based in this run. Mortal wants to know, any plans on doing an Eastman chemical? There's a possibility. Your best bet would be to send us an email at the Athearn product suggestion, and it's a possibility. If we can get enough information to do those, and it doesn't require new tooling, we can definitely consider it. Greg says, thank you for offering Southern Railway units, maybe a tag unit someday. Well, yeah, we got kind of close, but I know what you're talking about. You want the original before the merger. That's definitely a plan. Remember, the GP18s, they didn't sell that many of them. So that was new tooling about 3 years ago when we came out with the GP18. We're always going to be looking for additional roads, and that's a case where we might be able to justify doing that, as well as some other roads. Derek wants to know, is there another run of Norfolk and Western GP9 Redbirds planned? Not at this time. We don't have anything in the immediate future. However, you hear me talk about the Athearn product suggestion email. If we do get enough requests for that, or sometimes before we come out with a specific locomotive, we'll send out a survey. And if we get enough requests for it, we'll definitely do it. George is happy about the California traction. You are most welcome. That was a line that I bet a lot of you didn't think we were going to do. Let's see, I'm going to go back a little bit further. A lot of people are really happy about the Rock Island. Todd, no undecorateds in this round. We offered the, let's see, I think it was in December. We offered the GP7s in undeck, but no 18s in undeck. Glenn is just one of the many that are commenting on the Rock Island GP7s. You're welcome. Again, that is probably going to be the most popular locomotive out of this group. All right. A lot of people having great comments about the Jeeps. Somebody had asked me earlier regarding the New England Southern if we were going to do the matching GP7. Again, it's based on sales. We kind of took a gamble here because the GP18 there was not a lot of roads to choose from, and we figured let's do some interesting short lines and regionals. And of course, I have a thing for New England Southern because again, I rail fanned it a lot back in the late '80s and early '90s. So that's why we chose it. If we do see a good following of it, then there's a possibility we can do the Jeep 7 later. Derek says a little confusing. Is the GP7R only available in the Rock Island? Yes, for this run. We really wanted to have those Rock Island ones done earlier, so they would have been released in late 2023. But again, the tooling and the engineering behind it took a little bit longer than we wanted to. We've got a lot of stuff. The product development has a lot on their plate right now. And we wanted to add them to the GP18. So yes, the GP7Rs, the Rock Island ones are the only ones. Folks asking about the ETA on the surfliners. I wish I had better news for you. I know you guys have been waiting for a long time. We are trying our best to get those in late summer, early fall of this year. So we're talking August, September of 2024. I wish it was sooner, but some of the delays that we experienced really set us behind. But we are working on those. Let's see. I'm going to take one or two more questions here. Here's one from Ryan. I'm going to put it up there because I saw this on social media today, and this is a good example. This is how the Rock Island GP7Rs actually started. A lot of folks were saying, hey, what about my railroad? In this case, MKT has been extremely popular in social media today. So all you guys that want to see these in that really cool green and yellow paint scheme, what you need to do is send your comments and suggestions to Athearn Product Suggestion at athearn.com. Now, we're not going to do another run of GP7s probably for another year. But with that being said, if we've got a really good loyal following of MKT fans for GP7s, that makes product development's job that much easier. Especially if you've got information that you're willing to share with us so we can make your favorite railroad that much more accurate. So a lot of questions that I'm not really answering because they're basically wanting to know why we didn't do this certain road or why we didn't do that road. It's really dependent on the numbers, and in some cases, it's a gamble. Okay, going back to the GP7Rs, the Rock Island was a no-brainer for us because it seemed like everybody was asking for that. And let's face it, it was time to do those. Now, going to the GP18s, some roads came across pretty pretty easy for us to determine. Southern has got a really good following, so that made sense. Norfolk and Western, 1960s Pelver green, blue. That's a pretty good one. Conrail has shown a lot of support lately, so that's another one that we felt was strong. And then we took some gambles too. We took a few short lines that were gambles, like New England Southern, California Traction. Those sometimes actually end up being really good sellers. So just because it's a short line doesn't mean we're not going to select it. Sometimes we'll take a batch of locomotives and we'll take a strong influence from what we see from the comments / the Athearn product suggestion email. And then sometimes we'll take a gamble and see what happens. Okay, Jay Cure has been asking over and over again, and he really wants me to answer this question. Why no 100 in the P42 arrivals? That particular locomotive did some QC things that we wanted to address, and rather than just dump them into the dealer shops, we wanted to make sure they were 100% before they get shipped. I don't have an ETA on those just yet, but as product development and the factory get back to me as far as dates, we will keep you posted. All right. I am going to end tonight's program with one more question. And if I missed your question again, please do not be offended. I don't mean to not select you. I just try to find some of the biggest questions out there. One elephant in the room is I'm getting Illinois Central and Western Maryland fans asking, are we ever going to do chop nose Jeeps for them? There is something on the radar, but I don't have an ETA for you. All right. Wow, they're coming in quick now. MSRP on the GP18s. Well, I can actually show you that. And that MSRP on the GP18s, again, this is MSRP, so talk to your dealer. If you go without sound, they're $219.99. If you go with the Tsunami 2 already installed, they're $319.99. But again, that is MSRP. So talk to your dealer. All right. Well, good. I'm glad that you could join us. If you're catching us on the YouTube channel and you like the content of Train Tuesday and the other videos that we produce, do me a favor and do my coworkers a favor and like and subscribe. And any comments that you put in these videos after the fact, that only helps the algorithm. And who doesn't want more train videos in their YouTube feed? So go ahead and hit that like button and the subscribe button. And I will see you again on another Train Tuesday, which just happens to be next Tuesday. So until then, I want everybody out there to be happy, be healthy, be safe, do some good modeling, and above all, high greens. Take care, everyone.